There once was an axe, was a very blunt axe, and it was kind of good, but it was all blunt. And there once was an axe, was a very blunt axe, and I made it nice in my workshop. Alright, so today's video I'm just going to be blasting through fixing up this axe. So it's a Hultafors 1.75 kilo axe, so a big chunky monster of a thing. It's not really for going out camping or anything. This is just for the back garden, splitting up firewood, just for my fire pit in my hut. So I'm going to be making it sharp, making a nice mask for it, thinning down the handle just so that it fits the hand a bit better, and possibly doing a bit of burn work on it, making it look all nice and pretty. So if you're into that sort of thing, stay tuned. Right, first thing I'm going to get rid of is the Hultafors logo here because, well, it says handmade by Hultsbruk, Sweden. So I feel like Hultafors are kind of stealing credit for it here because it's got the Hultsbruk's stamp in the actual head. So yeah, I just clean that off, and once I make it all nice and sharp, it's as good as any Hultsbruk's axe because, well, that's what it is. So yeah, I clean that off, and to do that I just use angle grinder, whoops, with one of these bits on it. Right, so here you can see the difference in thickness between the smaller chopping axe and this big behemoth. So I'm going to thin this one down just a little bit. I'm not going to go quite as thin as a smaller one because it needs to be stronger, but you can definitely lose a little bit of width there. And yeah, got some old 40 grit. Let's get stuck in on this. You can see why I've got a long stick now, is because if you've got a short little block here and you start doing that, you end up cutting yourself. There's a nice long block. You can use this hand to give you the power, and the other hand to guide, and you're well away from the blade. Happy with that. And now here's where we need a lot more work. Okay, that's me done with the 40 grit. Got some 120. One of the best things you can do is get some old sandpaper that's got like metal on it, you know, from like sharpening your knives or axes, and then you rub it in and it just highlights all the little bits that you need to scrape down, and makes life a lot easier to see what you're doing. Alright, so I'm just going to burn the handle just a little bit. You got to be really careful when you're doing this, but it's better to do this before you linseed oil it, because you've got slightly more control, and if you do go too far you can scrape it away without too much consequences. Alright, so we just give that a wee minute to cool because it's a little bit hot to touch. In fact, maybe it's okay. I just think that gives it a really nice look, nice finish, especially once you get the linseed oil on there, which I think I might. I'll just scrape away a little bit with this. Just the bits where it's a little bit dark, just lighten it up a bit. Now this is just the first coat of many. Usually you do it once a day for a week, once a week for a month, and then once a month for a year. You don't need to follow it super strict, but it's a nice thing to do, and it makes your handles a lot more waterproof and a lot better, stronger, I think. Because I think the linseed oil kind of soaks into the wood and acts like a binding glue to make it stronger. Don't know if there's any truth in that, but that's what I feel like happens. And the reason you leave sharpening to last, or the reason I leave sharpening to last, is just so that you don't cut yourself, because it's one of the things when you're working on an axe this big, it's got a lot of weight to it, and when you make it really sharp, you've got to be really careful how you handle it. So doing all this stuff, you're just better off having it slightly blunt. Like, it's not super blunt, to be honest. Some might call that alright. And for splitting firewood, it's actually fine, but I just like everything to be really sharp. So that's the next stage. But I'll leave this for like an hour by the fire. Let it sort of dry and soak in. But yeah, we're getting there. Always burn your rubber gloves or any paper tissues or anything that's got linseed oil on them. I've said this in my previous videos, but if you just put them in the bin, there's a slight chance they can spontaneously combust, which is never a good thing. Right, so that's been about an hour next to the fire, rotated it a bit, and feels lovely. but it's not fully dry yet. I'm still going to have smelly hands, but yeah, going to get sharpening it now. Right, if you haven't seen this crazy contraption before, where have you been? Done this in pretty much a lot of my sharpening videos because this is how I sharpen stuff. It works really good. Probably not the safest thing with all these paper tissues everywhere, but I have a fire extinguisher over there, so it's completely 100% safe. I actually do wear glasses. And today, let's do the ear defenders. This one. So when you're doing that, you just need to make sure that the ground stays nice and even. Just eyeball it every couple of passes, and you might well find when you get it, it'll be skew or off to one side, but you can fix that right now. I think that looks pretty acceptable. So now I'm going to change from, that was 80 grit, and I'll go up to 400 grit, that's maybe a bit too big a jump. 120 grit, there we go. Do a bit more. It's changed up to 400 grit now. The reason I've got a bigger pad is just because that's the size of 400 grit I've got, so there's not any other reason for that. Right, so that's the 400 grit, which is quite a nice finish considering. Like once it gets old like that, it's more like sort of 1000 grit really. But we're not going to call it quits there. We're going to go up to the leather strop and the buffing compound. So just a piece of leather glued onto one of these pieces of sandpaper, and put buffing compound on it. You got yourself a leather strop. And the best thing to get this gunk off, see when you get the gunk from the buffing compound, just a bit of WD-40 works really good. There you go, save you fighting with it. So You got a baldy hand now. I would say that's good enough for wood splitting in the back garden. It's possibly a little bit overkill sharpening it that much. I just really like having a sharp axe, and handle's really nice and comfy. I think it looks really cool with a burn effect. Happy with the head now, and yeah, next just need to make a mask for it, and that way it'll be nice and safe. So let's get to it. Alright, so I've got some lovely 4mm thick leather for this. Really nice stuff. Just going to make the mask. It's kind of tricky because I already made one for a different axe. Like I ordered 2 of these, one for a friend. So I've got this template, but I figured I'll just run through how you make a template for your mask, because it's really not that difficult. Mostly the difficult thing is getting a piece of paper. There we go. So all you do is you just get a piece of paper, you fold it in half, but you only fold 1/4 of it, so you leave that bit open and kind of just have it loose, because it's important that you get it centered over there. So yeah, that's basically all you do. Fold it over there, and then what I do is I just put that down. Careful not to cut yourself, but you just kind of go around your nail to make the imprint. You can use a tool if you want, if you don't want to get your nails too close to the edge there, but you're not pressing enough that it's going to cut through the paper. You're just pressing enough to make a dent. So just get that. And same on the other side. All I'm going to do now is just pinch it here, and then you fold that out flat now after you've made that dent. Just go over it with a pen. So there I know that's where my axe is. So to make the mask, all you do is you just go out about, I don't know, 15mm. I usually just eyeball it. Just depends on how big an axe and how thick you want to make the thing that I've forgotten what it's called. I don't know why I make these videos. I'm so rubbish at remembering what things are called. But oh, an important thing is, see when you need to take the axe out of the mask, it needs to go out kind of at that angle. So you need to factor that into your mask and make it kind of like that. You know what, I might actually make that a bit more curvy. Yeah, that looks cooler. Cool, so just ignore that bit. And then all I'll do is just cut it out. And there we got our template. When you're going to draw on your piece of leather, it's important to leave, it's important to leave a little bit extra here, because you're going to have to cut this piece out again, you know, extra to the piece that you're cutting out there. So yeah, always just leave a little bit that you can cut out of, and it ends up saving leather in the long run. I'll just go with that. Oh, and you always want to check the underside just to make sure that there's no damaged bits to the leather that you're using, because nothing worse than cutting it out and realising that there's a horrible bit. Cool. This isn't totally necessary, just because it's really thick leather. I tend to gouge out the top here just so that it folds over easier. Just helps it fold over better. You gotta scrape the sort of shiny side off the leather just to make it rough for the glue to grip. Will completely dull your knife, but it's worth it. And what usually happens is, because that folds over, it'll make this bit that you cut out stick out the bottom, so you just sort of test it out, trim it accordingly. And carry on. So once you get to this stage, pretty much ready to glue it. So just make sure that everything's a little bit proud, and I just use Uhu multi-purpose glue. I find that works really nice. You basically apply it to both sides, let it kind of half set, and then it's like sort of contact adhesive, and sort of minimal clampage, but usually I just do it with my hands. This isn't really to keep it together. It's obviously it's going to get rivets and stitches as well, but it does help, and it just makes the stitching so much easier. Right, so you'll see the glue starts to change to a kind of slightly matte finish, and that's usually a sign that it's ready to go. I'll just when you just make sure that the two outside pieces line up more so than the inside one, because that's the one, or they're the ones that really matter. There we go. So now I'm just gonna sort of squish that with something heavy, namely my hand. Now's a really good time to just check that everything is hunky-dory, you know. And it's not. It's a good thing I checked, eh? I just go. Yeah, see, that's actually the first time I've ever had to make an adjustment like that, but that is why you always check before the glue sets. Let's just test that again. Right, so just to keep that nice and pinched shut, I usually just stick a rivet in there and the way I do that, you get your wee brass rivet, pretty much work out where it's going to go. That looks about right. And then you just push it in, that gives you a little dent. Let's just test this. There we go, and that just clamps that in nicely. Right, and then we just trim off all the excess. Well, that wasn't too much effort. And so just a little tip on needles, I don't actually use the biggest needles that I have. I tend to use these ones, which are just kind of one up from the smaller ones, and the reason that is just they fit through the hole easier. As long as the eye is big enough to get the artificial sinew through, then that's all that really matters. So I tend to measure out a lot more than I need because this stuff's cheap and there's nothing worse than running out of thread. To thread this stuff on, all you do, you go through the needle and then you just prick through the middle of the sinew like that. And then when you pull that down, when you pull that down, it's locked on. You just do that on both sides. So you start off at the top here, you just go through the top hole, and then you just go one through one side, and the other through the other side. Now, something you can do is stick on rubber gloves, which is what I'm going to do, because it helps you grip the needle. Yeah, look at that. You just pull every stitch nice and tight. Let's get on with it. When I get to the end here, you just work out like this is going to be the sort of front side. Tighten that up, and then this one, I go round, back through that hole. And then here I just do a nice box knot. You know, right over left, left over right. And cut that, and you just sort of burn it, and because it's artificial sinew, it just kind of burns like paracord. You just squish it down flat. Looks nice and neat. Just squish that in there. One of the most important things when you cut the strap for going around the back is to pull and stretch it as much as you can before you start measuring anything, because the leather will stretch a good inch and it'll just save it being all baggy after you finish making it. So, like I say, also test it to see if it's a good piece, if it tears or anything like that, and you know you got a duff bit. So you need to get these wee popper things. And one more of these. So you just have a rivet on one side and then a wee pop stud on the other side. Work out which side you want the pop stud to be on, because, you know, I reckon if you're right-handed, you hold the axe in your right hand and you take it off that way. So I want the pop stud to be there and the rivet to be there. Kind of work out roughly where you want it to be, where it looks nice. This bit is not an exact science, it pretty much doesn't really matter. I think about there is nice. A couple of ways of doing this. If you're doing it this way, make sure you don't drill through it into your actual axe head. But I just go through the top and then obviously mark the bottom side. Take that off. And said sacrificial piece of wood. And that is you through. And then you need to drill a smaller hole for the other side, and for the wee pop stud thing. Now's a good time to do it before you get all carried away. So you just, you know what, I got a messy work table here. Over there. Yeah, you just sort of line that up, and that way your holes will be exactly even on both sides. Like that. And it's just a case of popping that through. I really like these screw thread ones because if you ever want to change anything, or if the strap stretches and you want to replace it, you can just take it off really easily. Just leaves you with lots of nice options open. There we go, so that's the one side attached. For the next side, put it on, pull it nice and tight around the back, and then what I usually do is put that wee guy through there, so that there's a bit of metal sticking up. So pull that really tight. Not really tight, but just where you want it to be. And then you get a lovely imprint, which now we just drill. Go and take this wee guy and that wee guy, that one on. Let's do the same again. There we go, and then you just trim this wee bit. Alright, so there we go. That is how you make an axe a little bit better. So definitely a massive improvement to when it arrived. The edge is razor sharp, the handle, I think it just looks so much better. It feels much nicer up the top here. You know, it's still quite thick. I didn't want to go too thin because, well, I'm teaching my son how to split, so he tends to sometimes overstrike and things like that. So yeah, I think this will be pretty good. So there's a wee close-up look at it. Sheath. Still a little bit tight, but that'll stretch. Well chuffed. Anyway, there you have it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. Subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.